Hello, everyone. We are live, and as per what's in the description, we will be having a guest this week. His name is John from California. He's called in a couple of times into as most recently as last on the last show, and he's raised a little bit of, I guess, a bit of a kerfuffle in all the stuff that he said in the comments. So I had invited him to be on the call, and he did say he'll be on. He's still not yet on, but while we're waiting, we can talk about, let's see, we can talk about the post that he had made. And right now, I have Blarg and Jeebus with me, but he basically, in his second call, his first call was also a little bit notorious because he ended it with claiming that Jesus is photosynthesis. But he called back in as SR had invited him to come back on. And that's where he took a while. It took a while, but he did get to the point where he made a point that E equals mc squared doesn't reflect the total amount of kinetic energy that should be in a mass traveling at the speed of light. And we had a long thread trying to explain to him why that's not the not accurate way of looking at what the problem is. So this whole trail, okay, there it is. So this whole, and also I should say that the reason why he made that point, he essentially got to the point where he's saying that energy in uh, put in gets 2 times the energy out, which is obviously wrong, and we can talk about it more specifically. And he says, surely that can't be right. Yeah, it's not right. He's wrong. But he used this to get to the Bell's inequality. And he mentions the 2022 Nobel Prize in Physics, where they ran an experiment on Bell's inequality, and he says that the result was that it established a dichotomy between the idea of locality and realism. That's also incorrect as well. Um, the the conclusion of the experiment basically said that in quantum mechanics, what we're seeing is not locally real. That means it can't be both local and real at the same time. Meaning it could be just local, it could be just real, or it could be neither. But basically, it's just that it can't be locally real. But he took that to mean that there's some other reality that we're not aware of, and used that to jump in to say, hey, that means God. And that was the whole problem with what he was saying. He never got to this point in his actual call because um, the host pretty much knocked him out as soon as he mentioned that his physics professor thought he was so amazingly smart that they named a unit of measure after him. And within these comments, he does mention what that unit of measurement was. It's basically, he calls it pace, and it's basically 1 over velocity. Now, it doesn't make sense for you to have a separate variable or separate unit of measure that's just a reciprocal of another. It's kind of like having c as the speed of light and then c squared be a differently named uh, a variable, or differently named constant. Maybe call it the
Just jumping
5.
in there,
We wouldn't do something like that. So
Casey.
yeah, and yeah, go ahead.
Just jumping in there. There are very specific places where sometimes that makes sense. Hertz, for example, is reciprocal of time.
Right.
But that one makes it's a useful quantity and an extremely useful quantity. So, but no, pace
Yeah, I
isn't
think
at
something
all.
that's based, something per time is a little bit different, right?
Yeah. So that was just the point I'm making, that in some very specific circumstances, the reciprocal of a unit can be a useful unit, but this is not one of those. There's
Yeah.
no reason to want to know 1 over how fast something is going. Just use how fast something is going, and if you need to divide by it, divide by it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think something per second is a little bit different than, taking meters per second and changing it to seconds per meter. I guess, maybe there's some benefit to that, but, it doesn't seem like there would be.
Yeah, it's
Um,
well, that's mostly of use for just interest. So speed of light. Um, how long does it take to travel a meter? We're not going to
yeah,
use that in physics calculations, but people might be interested in how ludicrously tiny that number is.
yeah. And interestingly enough, we take that time, the amount of time that's used to travel a meter, to define a meter, right? If
Yeah,
a light traveling that distance within that time is equivalent to we're standardizing it as a meter.
yeah,
So, but yeah, I mean, in terms of like, especially in when we're talking about some of these physics equations, like the kinetic energy equation, it doesn't make sense at all to have this thing called pace. And I'm not sure if it's in this thread, but he was actually showing an example of how pace is used, and it was kind of interesting because he um, actually, I think there were some mistakes that he was making, and he was getting some weird answers uh, that would have been easier to get if he just didn't use the pace, if he just used the velocity. So, uh, having this reciprocal value or variable or unit of measure, it actually made the whole thing worse, more convoluted. It must be in a different one. It's kind of hard to find here.
yeah. It just wasn't getting anywhere. Like the units of measure came out. The units came out right. They were fine, but nobody wants to know pace. So multiplying, kinetic energy by something or dividing it by whatever to get pace is the most pointless thing, because nobody wants pace. Like
Yeah,
it's
it doesn't tell
yeah,
you anything.
yeah, it's not useful for anything.
Yeah, whether it's 1 pace or 10 pace, that really didn't tell you anything. And the thing is, in the example he gave, he basically it gives you distance, because I think all the units kind of canceled out, and he just ended up getting distance or reciprocal of a distance. So that's where
Yeah,
I think this is it.
and the problem with pace is also, the larger the number, the smaller the effect.
Yep.
It's asked backwards. So
Yeah.
and again, there are very specific places where that's useful, as in hertz.
Hmm.
But generally, if you go, oh, we're going to be traveling at 55 pace, you just go, was that faster or slower than 60 pace? And you go, weirdly, it's faster. Yeah, that's not helpful.
I wonder if he got the time zone mixed up, and that's why he's not showing up.
Didn't
I wonder
didn't
if
you say he
go ahead.
sent an email saying he wasn't going to show? Did he change his
Yeah,
mind again?
yeah. Well, I said he wasn't going to show because he wasn't responding to my emails. And
Ah,
then about 30 minutes ago, he responded and said, "Hey, sorry for the late response. Was busy past couple of days, but got my calendar free for tonight. I just went in and tested it, and seems like my device works fine. Talk to you later." Um, and he's not connecting in. So I was just going to ask if Gilbert is still on, and then we can actually talk to him. But I think he must have dropped off because he wasn't going to be. He got bumped. Let's see.
I did a
Jeff.
oh sorry.
Yep.
I did a Google search for this inverse speed, and there's a website called iSoul, ISOUL, and I'm wondering if this is him, because it's talking all about speed and its inverse, and goes into arithmetic.
ISOUL.
Yeah.
Is it ISOUL.com?
.org.
Oh, .org.
Yeah.
Oops. ISOUL.org. Oh, interesting. It is kind of
He does claim to be 24, and that guy is not.
yeah. Although he may be getting it from here. And,
Well,
and
that's a
there's
possibility.
yeah. Hold on. I think we have hey John.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep. I thought maybe you got
Perfect.
the time zone mixed up.
This is the right time, right? It's 6:15 here,
Yeah.
but I think that's 8:15 your time.
Yep. Yeah, it's just we had started a while ago, and we were wondering if you were showing up. But I guess you must be in like California or something.
Yeah, I'm in California. It's about 6. Sorry about that. I planned for 6:15. I could have been here earlier. I just didn't know.
Okay. Do you can you see the screen?
Yes.
It looks like maybe you're outside.
Can you see me? I was gonna. I'm about to sit down. I'm walking to the place I was gonna do the stream from.
No, we can't see you. We just see your avatar. So, and
Okay,
none of
cool.
us
I'll
are,
turn the
have our
camera on in
camera
a second. I'm still walking is the only reason.
Yeah, the reason why
I'm
I
here,
asked
though.
if you can see the screen is because there's a website called iso.org, and we were wondering if that's where you were getting some of your information.
No, but I'm interested to see it. As far as I know, this is an original theory.
Okay, well,
It's like so good though. I feel like
I don't know
other
if that's
people
good
have
or
to have
bad.
arrived at this. Find out. We'll find out.
Yeah, I mean the thing is like everything you're saying is so wrong. But we can discuss it. But let me know when you're ready because I just want you to kind of introduce yourself and tell us what's going on with you.
Cool. Let's turn my camera on. I think I gotta switch it around. Sorry. Do you know how to flip the camera on it's just not letting me see the options.
I think if you go to the camera setting, maybe
Oh, here it is.
that'll let you.
Yep, here it is. Sorry about that.
No worries. But it sounds like you're outside.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
I didn't want to bother my roommates with this. Wait, that's wrong.
Well, it did change the camera.
Yeah, it was pointing the other way. Oh, it was just too bright behind me. Let me go to a better place.
Yeah.
We're seeing the sunlight.
Okay. All right. So to start off, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, what your religious background is, and maybe talk about your education, since we did talk about you taking some physics courses.
Fair enough. I mean, I definitely don't want to be here trying to argue from authority, claiming that I have too much. Sorry, there's still a lot of glare. The sun's coming down around here. I was gonna turn my camera off. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's fine. You can turn it off.
But yeah, basically, I have some college experience. I don't, just for my own privacy, I don't want to say the specific school, but
Yeah.
call it mid-range to up. Nothing, not an Ivy League, nothing crazy, but mid-range polytechnic school. I completed most of my bachelor's degree there as a double major in economics and materials engineering. Because of just some family stuff and the coronavirus, I still haven't gone back to finish that. I'll probably do that next year. But in terms of religious background, I grew up, I don't want to say I was an atheist, because I think in order to be an atheist, I think that you need to have a little bit more commitment than I did, like a little bit more. I was very a-religious, but I wasn't like, it wasn't something that I necessarily thought about. And some of the first things that kind of introduced me to religion and introduced me to, like, just thinking about philosophy in this type of way is one of my old bosses when I was in high school. We would just hang out, we would watch the Atheist Experience, he would show me a few, like Talk Heathen, those types of things. The Young Turks, like, he was he's very politically minded, atheist himself. And honestly, I just, I love the guy. He's real fun, but sometimes you got to mess with him. This has been an extended version of that. He sat there making fun of the, like, flying spaghetti monster. I sat down, I figured out how the flying spaghetti monster actually is the biblical Jesus. And I got some mathematical, like, not only is it Jesus, I think it's real.
Okay. By the way, one of the things that I think caught a lot of people's attention about what you said was what got you kind of kicked out of the call last week when you mentioned that your professor was so impressed that they named a unit of measure after you.
That happened. And that's something I'm going to get, as soon as I get back to school, I'm going to continue with my work. My plans are to go on to graduate school. That's part of the reason I took some time off, was to just kind of, get all my eggs and get all my stuff lined up so that I was able to go in and really perform for the last couple of years. I want to have a good, I want to apply for graduate school, so I want to work on my GPA, stuff like that. But no, that actually happened. And it was, I definitely came across wrong. I wasn't trying to say, like, too much of a douchebag, but we're hanging out in office hours. I was going in there. I was telling him about all this stuff. I converted him to this faith. He started agreeing that, I think food is the Lord and Savior. And, like, we were just funny. He started actually teaching his class different because of this stuff.
You're talking about your physics professor agreeing with you.
Yes.
And were you talking to him about how the kinetic energy of a mass traveling at the speed of light is not equivalent to the mass energy conversion?
Exactly. Yeah. He believed by conservation of energy that this was not directly related to the units. The units are separate, but that was the first thing I came here to discuss. That okay, also
so
converts.
Why?
Yeah, that brought some credibility, if that makes sense.
Well, so the question was, why wasn't the unit called the John, right?
It's called the Fitz.
But if it's named after you, it should be called the John, right? Or whatever your last name is. Unless your last name is Pace.
It's called the Fitz. My last name's Fitz something. So it's called the Fitz.
Oh, but you said it was Pace. But you said it was pace.
Yeah, the units are pace. And then so, and if you had a unit of velocity, you would have like meters per second. Or if you had a unit of frequency, you would have the hertz. The unit of pace that I've established is the Fitz.
Okay. And so how would you use that? What use do you get out of having a reciprocal of speed?
The thing that I worked out with him that we were doing, and again, this is not profound. I know you guys are all, I know you guys all have an education that goes beyond this. Is, the same basic physics that all of us did. But the way that we found it, not revolutionary or anything, but the way that I was using it in our class, which was just super basic kinematic, think of the most basic, just like weed out the people who didn't take it in high school physics class. That's why I was going to office hours so much, was just sort of, you ever had the type of class where, it takes 10 minutes to do the homework? You can either do that and like not get anything out of it. But, if you have a cool enough professor and you just go in and like, the homework's done and you're just hanging out with them in office hours, that was where we had those fun conversations. And then one of the things we used it for was, and this is what he started, he literally changed how he was teaching his class because he thought this kind of made sense. It just helps you build an intuition a little bit better, is instead of thinking in terms of velocity, where you're solving for a distance, you're given a problem where, blah, blah, blah is going to travel for however long amount of time. Obviously, sometimes with like projectile motion, that can be useful because you have like hang time, but it was a silly class, and I was kind of just making fun of the problems, if anything. We were just getting these real easy, like, well, if this happens for this long, how far will the ball go? And then so what we did was, instead, when we used pace, we would get answers in units of time. So he could ask us questions of like, he describes a path length, gives us some type of integral we got to solve to figure out how long. It'll give us like an arc length.
You don't get time, right? It's not per unit of time.
If you integrate it over a distance, you do.
No, but what you're getting is the distance. You're getting the distance per amount of time. So if you have 5 pace, you're basically, it just means that you
you're getting the time per distance. That's where it's different. Velocity is the distance per time. Pace is time per distance. So if you integrate it, you typically integrate velocity over an interval of time.
Okay, yeah.
If instead you integrate pace over a distance, like just a path length, that gives you the amount of time it takes to traverse that path.
Okay, yeah, right. Sorry. So like if you have 60 pace, it means that it took you 60 seconds to travel 60 seconds in that meter, right?
I mean, you have to define the baseline. That's why there's actually a few. When I said there's the fits, this was the joke. There's like the big fits, the little fits. We had a bunch of different fitses for whatever fits the equation or fits the circumstances we had, was the joke. But an example would be 60 miles an hour is a velocity, so the pace of that would be like a mile per minute. And that's where I honestly, I came up with this just driving and just running around. It's very intuitive stuff. But
okay. By the way, the other people on the call are Blarg and Jeebus. You may have seen them in the comments. You definitely saw Blarg in the comments, right? Because he was responding to a lot of the things you were saying.
Definitely. I have some responses for him too. I've been lazy about my commenting, but don't think I'm gone quite yet.
All right. So let's first talk about this whole kinetic energy and Einstein mass equivalency equation.
Sure.
You're essentially saying that they should be the same, right? You're saying that the kinetic energy of a mass traveling at the speed of light should be the amount of energy you get when you convert that mass directly into energy, right?
Not exactly. It's not the same mass, and that's where it's tripped. That's, I think, where a lot of our confusion comes down to. I know it's way back there, but if you go back to my original comment, I did have to have like a footnote in there. This is something I talked with my professor about. I could have been more in depth, but honestly, just sort of the way things were going, I wasn't trying to. I felt like I wrote too much about it already, so I was trying not to make it even more convoluted.
But to summarize, what you were saying is that if you took a mass of a gram, you should be able to. You're saying that we should expect to be able to accelerate that to the speed of light by taking the energy that you get from converting a gram directly into energy. I think it's like 9 petajoules or something.
A better way to phrase it, in my opinion, like a way that it'll avoid more of our confusion, is I believe that by the laws of relativity, if you maximize the function for kinetic energy, you say the greatest amount of kinetic energy that you could possibly give to a particle is going to be 1/2 mc squared. I think that that's weird because if you maximize the input function, which, you know, somehow you had to accelerate it to that speed in the first place. You had to get the fuel from somewhere. I was looking at it in terms of conservation of energy. Energy in equals energy out. And that's why I set up the thought experiment very specifically. I didn't want to talk, you know, obviously we can't build this. And, you know, we can sit here as engineers and pick out there's a million problems. If I had if I was sitting on a formula for something that could do things at the speed of light, I'm just taking my defense contract money. I'm not on the
thing is, there's a fundamental problem, right? That you can't get any mass to the speed of light because you essentially get to a divide by zero error. You know, you get to an undefined point.
Yeah.
But
exactly. It would have to have effectively zero mass.
Right. So
which is actually part of my point, though. That's not a problem. That supports my argument when I get to it.
Okay, before we get to it, so just...
Sorry, but it just doesn't. There's so many things wrong with what you're saying. It's just mind-boggling. Let's just start with the fact that E equals mc squared is the equation for energy of a motionless particle. There is no kinetic energy term in there. So using that equation to describe what's happening is the wrong equation. And you will get the wrong answer.
Remember, I have a thought experiment.
No, I understand.
Your thought experiment's wrong. You can think about things all you like, but if you get the wrong answer, your thought experiment is wrong. You're barking up the wrong tree. You mentioned relativity, but you demonstrate exactly no understanding of relativity whatsoever. Hang on a sec, just shut those dogs up.
Wait, let me just ask John here. So, John, why can't a mass be accelerated to the speed of light?
There's a variety of reasons. The one that I learned in physics, the very intuitive one, is based, because of time dilation and length contraction. You're reaching, as you get closer and closer to light speed, like you're getting to an asymptote. The reason momentum is the derivative of kinetic energy is as you go faster and faster, you have to add, it's not like a linear thing. You have to add more and more energy per increase
why do you need
in
to
velocity.
Add more energy? But why do you have to add more energy to increase the velocity?
Because at that momentum, your momentum is what resists changes to velocity. At rest speeds, we tend to think of it as the mass, but it actually is the momentum. Same way as you rotate a bike wheel. Now it's harder for it to fall over because it resists changes to speed more. You need to overcome that.
No, sorry, you're just fundamentally wrong there. It doesn't matter how fast a particle is traveling. Like a particle traveling relative to you at 0 meters per second will resist motion the same as one traveling 10 meters per second, the same as one traveling 20 meters per second. Once you start to get into relativistic effects, then you require to use a whole different set of equations. But it's not because of momentum.
Bullshit. That's momentum.
There's no term. There's no S term. There's no term for speed or no term for velocity that you're working with there. It's just insane. I'm at a loss to even sort of comprehend how badly wrong you are.
Well, Blarg, so John, I just muted you a little bit because there's a lot of background, and I wanted to make sure that Blarg can talk. But Blarg, momentum is mass times velocity, right? I think that's what John is getting at.
Yes, but he was saying that that it's momentum that resists change in velocity. And you go, no, it's mass that resists change in velocity.
Right. Yep.
No, that was my point, though. We think of that like that that, but it's not. No, it's momentum. And if you go back to how Newton originally presented his equation, it actually is changing momentum.
John, momentum is mass times velocity. So when you start at velocity 1 and you want to get to velocity 2, it's the mass that's resisting that, not the velocity or not the momentum in total.
It's both, and that's why in the kinetic energy equation. No, let me defend this because I think you guys are wrong on this. The reason that velocity is squared in the kinetic energy equation is that momentum is the derivative of kinetic energy with respect to velocity. There,
John. Oh, what happened? We lost him. Apathetic fish made a point. The guy really likes to talk a lot, doesn't he? I mean, part of it might be it's tough for him to hear, especially since it seems like he's in a very loud environment. But Blarg, I was trying to lead him to, give the right explanation, which is that at relativistic speed, the mass increases, right? So in order to increase the velocity, you need to add even more energy as the relativistic mass increases.
Yeah, that's right. So it's like velocity is important, but it's not momentum that's resisting it. It's the it's the mass.
Yeah, he's kind of taking. Hold on. Okay, John, you're back. John, we're not hearing.
Can you hear me? You're not hearing me?
You are saying.
Can you hear me now?
But you're.
Yeah. Somewhat. Sometimes.
How about now?
I still can't hear you. I'm not sure what's going on.
Well, I can hear you.
I plugged my phone in. I'm not sure why that would do anything.
Okay.
You hear me?
We can hear you. You plug your phone in, you mean into
perfect.
like a charger? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I just have a portable. I can hear you guys fine. Can you hear me?
Yeah. So you said it's momentum, right? Momentum is just mass times velocity. So when you get from velocity 1 to velocity 2, why do you need more energy when you're at relativistic speed?
Because momentum is the derivative of kinetic energy with respect to velocity. Therefore, since momentum increases with velocity, you need more. It's the derivative. The derivative is like your marginal cost function. I don't know. It's simple.
Let's take it from a particle traveling 10 meters per second, and you want to get it to 20 meters per second.
Yes.
The amount of energy, and then when you go from 20 to 30, each time the momentum increases linearly. So why don't you need to
energy
give it,
from 20 to 30 increased by a greater amount than it did from 10 to 20? That's my argument. The momentum did increase linearly, but a linearly increasing derivative will produce a parabola of the overall function.
Can I
and that's what the kinetic energy function is. It's parabolic with respect to velocity.
Sorry. John, can we just take a step back and ask this? What's the point of you arguing about pointless bullshit that you don't particularly understand? It's not getting us to your God. It's not getting us anywhere. So what's the point of you arguing your tiny amount of physics knowledge that's being applied as everybody's told you incorrectly? Where are you trying to go with it? What are you trying to tell us?
Oh, sorry.
John?
I'm trying to unmute you, John. Go ahead.
I think you unmute him, and then he tries to unmute himself. So go
Can you hear me now?
John. Yeah.
All right. First of all, I don't necessarily agree that you've demonstrated that my understanding is wrong. I would, in my opinion, I've seen it on the other side, but I agree with you fundamentally. We shouldn't be arguing about this because this isn't my point. I would like to, before we get into the weeds, start with just defining my thought experiment in basic terms on my own terms, and then you respond to that.
Okay, before you do that, let me just give you the answer. The reason why you can't accelerate mass to the speed of light is that as you get closer to the speed of light, the mass actually changes because of relativistic effect.
True.
So as you get closer to the speed of light, the mass becomes infinite, it approaches infinity, and you have to add more and more energy. Before you get to the relativistic speed, kind of relatively normal speed, you're not having to increase the energy, to be able to increase the velocity. So that's why the kinetic energy equation is 1/2 mass times velocity squared, because you're essentially integrating the difference between the two speeds. And when you do that, you basically get 1/2.
Yeah, it's the average value of the energy over the interval of, from zero velocity to the velocity you're at.
Yeah, except that doesn't happen when you're at the relativistic speed. You don't get 1/2. So that's the big difference when you
define relativistic speed.
Relatively close to the speed of light, where speed of light times or divided, or a ratio of the speed of light, or sorry, the velocity over speed of light becomes actually substantial. Normally, it's speed over
Greater than what
velocity.
value?
Velocity over speed of light at relatively small speed is essentially 0. But let's say that you get to half the speed of light, you are now, that factor is now 1/2.
Okay.
Well, not exactly 1/2, but it's more significant than
I'm
when
not
it's
sure
at
what
normal
factor
speed.
you're referring to. I agree with the general principle there, though. It sounds like you understand. I mean, yeah.
The fact
Yeah,
is
but
called
I'm
gamma.
I was just saying if there was like some type of, if you would have an act, when you say relativistic speed, you're saying, because you're saying that it behaves differently at a relativistic speed. So where's the cutoff in your opinion? Where does everything start behaving differently? I'm going to argue that everything behaves the same. It's just the effect is so small at our types of speed, we don't know.
That's right. Because you could use the relativistic equation to calculate the energy that you put in, but it is so small, you essentially zero it out.
Yes, and that was actually, so that's basically the point of why my professor thought the pace thing was, and again, we're not saying it's revolutionary. We're not saying you could, and we, by definition, we have to get the same answer with this one as they would have gotten the other way, because the other way is right.
sorry,
we know
John,
it's right. We better get the same answer, right? He just thought it saves
John?
a little bit of time working in terms of energy, because then it's easier to, you don't have to work with the Lorentz factor as much. You don't have to think about how mass is changing. Can you hear me?
John, I don't care. Get to the point of why you're trying to do it. You can go and do your math however you like. If that makes you happy, that's fine. But please get to the point. What is the point?
So Blarg, the reason why
occasionally I found it relevant in some other physicists to work out models for how particles might behave at high speeds in response to forces that are applied. I don't know. If you can't figure out the point of that, I don't have a lot to tell you. But
John, this isn't physics stack exchange.
Yes.
This is, you called the atheist experience, and we're talking about that connection. So don't care about it being useful.
That's my point. I don't know why we're talking about pace.
You're the one who brought it up.
You brought
You're the one
this
who
up.
put it in all the posts.
Wait, hold on, you guys. So
that's the point.
So Blarg,
I've been asking to do my thought experiment again, and you keep like.
Okay, Blarg. The reason why I think it's relevant is that if he's completely wrong, anything he says after that is wrong as well. But just for the sake of argument, let's just
is that
move
logic?
Ahead.
Yep. But the point is, get let's have a map of where we're attempting to
Yeah.
get with it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So John, go ahead and
Yes, and I
talk
have
about
one. And that's what's frustrating to me.
okay, go ahead and give the next your next argument, which is basically okay. Now that for whatever reason you think the amount of energy on two sides of an equation isn't coming up, you're basically saying that our understanding of physics is wrong, right? So what's the rest of your argument?
I wouldn't necessarily say that your understanding of physics is wrong. It might just be incomplete, but basically all I'm saying, and it is pretty simple. So Blarg brought up a good point of E equals mc squared is not an equation for a mass that's traveling at speed. That's the equation for a mass at rest, right? So
It's an
my thought
equation for when a
experiment,
mass at rest is converted into energy. You know, like for example, in fusion and fission.
you could, and it'd be valid to consider that mass potential energy even before it's converted. You could think about it as a quantity of potential energy that's yet to be fused, yet to be. I don't know
But you
I don't
don't
know the verb form of fission. Sorry about that. I almost said
the
Faisal.
entire you don't get the entire mass, you know, fusing or entire
In
mass
practice,
fizzing.
yes, of course. In
It's just
practice,
a
yes.
fragment of it.
Well,
Just
you
like
can with
when
never
you
mind.
burn
antimatter.
gas,
But
you don't
keep
get the
going.
actual like quoted. You don't get even close to the actual quoted BTU value, but they're still gonna sell propane in terms of BTUs,
Okay,
and that makes sense.
that's fine. Keep going. So why does this mean God exists?
So the terms of my thought experiment, which were just completely general, and I know we can't build, and those aren't relevant. Those aren't relevant objections to this. Telling me that I can't build it isn't telling me something that I don't know. I know we can't build it for a lot of reasons, but
We're not
just
saying you
in
can't
the most
build it.
general terms
By the
possible,
way,
picture
we're
a
not
device
saying
for converting
John,
nuclear energy into kinetic energy.
John, we're not saying that you can't build it. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that you have the wrong equation and you're getting the wrong results, and you're deriving a conclusion based on, you know, wrong understanding of the equation. So don't say that it's because that, you know, we're saying that you can't build it. That's not the issue. We're talking about the fundamental equations, the meanings of the equations. John, you might still be on mute.
While he's working out that, I'd point out that the difference between physics and engineering, and it's a path I had to take, is that engineering's happy to do non-real world examples, to do the math in hypothetical. You know, the joke about physicists with the spherical chicken in a vacuum. That approach is used all the time, and it is absolutely fine. So at no point is there an issue with assuming 100% conversion, which you can achieve out of any matter annihilation, and just assume some theoretical tool that converts all of that energy into imparts all of the energy onto a piece of something that you're accelerating, a mass that you're accelerating. That is absolutely fine as a thought experiment. As an example of that type of thing, the Carnot cycle in thermodynamics, not something that can be built, but a useful thing to use as an example against which other thermodynamic cycles are compared. So there's no problem with that approach.
Yeah, but the thing is, in your thought experiment, you can't use wrong equations, right? You can't say that.
That's exactly
You
right.
can't say that it's 5 times mass times velocity squared for the kinetic energy, because that's wrong.
Yeah, or use an equation for something completely unrelated.
Right.
There's no
saying that. Yeah, you can't say, well, momentum is 1/2 mass times velocity squared, And when you take the momentum using mass times velocity, you get a different answer, right? I mean, those are just wrong. So your thought experiment can't be taking wrong equations and saying that, hey, these things don't work. But let's try. He's back, or is trying to reconnect. But let's just try to get past the physics portion. We'll stipulate that the physics itself is okay, but let's just try to get to his explanation of why this means God, and I think this is where he gets into the Bell's inequality. So John, so let's skip the part about the whole equation thing. What I was just trying to say, I hope you heard me, but even if we're not saying that the issue is that it's a thought experiment. We're just saying that within that thought experiment, you still have to use the correct equation for the correct purposes, and that's our disagreement. But let's get past that. And can you explain to us why that means God exists?
It means, and I guess you could, and that's why I brought up monism, was if you wanted to say it's not God, you can maybe quibble a little bit, but it proves the existence of an underlying real reality, unified completely with everybody's individual local experiences, that goes beyond the ability of any one local perspective to ever perceive or comprehend entirely. We can only get half of the picture.
Yeah, you just made a jump. How does that do that?
Well, that was why I was gonna have to stick with my argument. The thing I wanted to say though was I'm just having some internet problems out here. I didn't realize how bad my connection would be. The thing you brought up though is a valid point of why am I saying I get a little frustrated too. I'll tell you the truth of I think that we kind of do reach a stalemate. How about what I could tell you I could do is, since I've had this, you can definitely call out my understanding of physics. I'm gonna hear that. That's part of why I learned. That's part of why I'm passionate. Is I know I got a lot to. I know I don't know a lot. That's why I'm curious about it. That's why it's something that entertains me. But my physics teacher clearly knew at least as much about physics as you guys. And I did this with a few physics professors, all of whom were pretty smart guys. They brought up the same. I've had this conversation before. What I could do is, and again, I'm not trying to walk off on you guys. I feel bad, but I didn't realize how bad my internet connection would be. I don't want this to be a hassle all the time. What I can do is I'll give you a real clear, 2-3 pages at worst, maybe even less than that, roadmap. Why does this prove God? Why did, just answer the obvious questions that, because I've had this conversation before. And here's what I'll tell you. This is what I'll leave you with. And this is where it really does have a point. I'm like kind of trolling, but this is my point. This is all going to be used in a Supreme Court case to take down the war on drugs.
Okay. I'm not sure how you're connecting these things, but my recommendation to you,
that's where the fun is.
When you're writing this up, you have to make connections, right? You can't just go from, well, these equations didn't equal out, so therefore, a whole different reality.
Absolutely. I'll hear that out.
That.
I'll really do a best effort to not only answer the questions that I've been asked before by physics. For 1 second, I have some background noise here. I'm gonna mute.
I'm sorry, you leaped from an equation that was wrong to an unconnected conclusion, and then you went along and said, and because basically your conclusion was therefore God, which is then going to be used as a Supreme Court. I'm sorry, but either you're trolling us or there's something
religious
wrong.
Liberty, baby. Let's go.
Sorry, but no, not copping it. So.
Okay. By the way, John.
Okay, I'll get this out. You're right that it won't be there'll be a flow to it. It'll be a progressive kind of argument. This leads to that, leads to this. Why am I using this equation? How can I justify this? I'll answer all those questions. I would like to, and it might be a little easier for me to just do that in writing, where I'll sort of make it look like it's a script, a dialogue where here's the question, here's the answer. I think that'd be a good format there. I'll send it to you. Obviously, you can't, I don't want to represent your point. So if you tell me, hey, I had a different question, or hey, I would have said this, that's valid. You can totally argue on those terms. But here's my thing that I'll leave you with, because this is my point of my God is food religion. So I'm going to argue that I have a religious obligation to be fruitful and multiply, to be as economically productive as possible, to create as much plant matter or pleasurable derivatives of plant matter somehow, because that's everything good in the universe. Sit down and think about it.
Sorry.
Everything good either comes from a plant, is a plant. Everything bad is stuff that's like we go off the.
Sorry,
We've lost you.
just drop him. He's trolling. This is no person. Well, if he's not trolling, then essentially we're making fun of somebody with an issue, and I don't want to be involved in either of those.
All right. Well, I guess yeah, I'll go ahead and remove him. I guess we didn't even get to the whole point about the photosynthesis. So I mean, I did want to use this opportunity to try to find out if he was trolling. Actually, let me just add him back on. And so, John, can you hear us? I mean, it seems like you have a connection issue. No. Yeah, so I wanted, one of the things I was going to ask him was to try to suss out whether he really is serious or whether he's trolling. I mean, all this time he's acting as if he's serious, but I just find it very hard to believe that a college professor in physics wouldn't be able to, tell him, hey, you know what, you're using the equation wrong. Yeah, so Hampton, he did kind of say, I'm kind of trolling. And the other thing I wanted to ask him was, in one of the comments, he did kind of say he was being sarcastic, but I wasn't sure if he was doing that just to kind of walk back kind of a wrong response that he made, just to pretend that he wasn't wrong, or whether he was actually trolling. So I
Yeah.
am not sure if he's
There's no way any college level professor looked at anything he's written and went, that looks good, because it is such basic physics errors. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
There's just I did my physics degree a lot of years ago now, and didn't work as a physicist. I worked as an engineer. And even for me, it's so blatantly obvious with that low level of physics. I got the whole background, but my understanding is, I've tried to keep it up to date as much as possible. But if you don't work in the industry, it becomes a little hazy. But it's just it's so obvious. It's like putting a neon light in a dark room. It stands out so brightly. So there is zero chance that it's a true story that his physics professors looked at those equations and went, yeah, that looks good. No, there's no chance. Zero.
Well, I guess it depends on how he had that discussion, and maybe he's in a kind of a religious university or school, and maybe the discussion was really about kind of, this is how it proves God kind of thing.
I think he also then just claimed his math converted his physics professor into a Christian at one point in there as well.
Said that he converted them. It sounded like,
yeah, there'll be a spot. It's worth going back and we'll check it.
Okay.
To make a comment about it. But yeah, I'm sure he said something about it converted his. Yeah, there was something in that lines, and you just go, no.
Yeah. So Miranda, we actually won't be able to ask him about the plant thing. I had some questions for that as well, because like if you talk about photosynthesis, all you're really getting out of that is glucose and oxygen. So are we saying Jesus is just glucose and oxygen? But yeah, that it seemed like then he got into that whole woo thing about the plant stuff. So all right. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and that's the point at which you just say, well, okay, either he's just trolling or he's unwell, and yeah, this is enough.
well, the thing is, like, when you get into this kind of religious thinking, and we see that with a lot of the comment trolls, that they aren't necessary. I mean, they say really stupid things, right? Dumb things, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're trolling. Yeah, we think they're trolling just because how could anyone without any type of mental issues say those things? But there are plenty of people who do. So I don't want to say that he is trolling. And like I said, that's why I wanted to. That was one of my intent in talking to him, to try to kind of figure out if he really was being serious. I was just trying to find a comment that he made to me about that he was being sarcastic or something, which had kind of made me think that maybe he was trolling. But let's see here. Let me show you here. So
The reality is he's a relatively bright bloke. I don't doubt that for a minute. But he's also so highly convinced of his own answer
brilliance.
that he
No.
doesn't care. He doesn't care that people are telling him and showing him where he's wrong.
Yeah.
He's sticking with what he's got because it gives the answer he wants.
Yeah, he's very not just convinced of. I mean, it feels like he's very convinced that he is some kind of genius, right? That he's found something that no one else has.
Yeah, he hasn't.
Yeah. So
He found a 0 in a physics exam. That's what he found.
yeah. So I did want to get little information about his education background, but it does seems like he hasn't completed his bachelor's. So
Yeah, and it's not a bachelor's in physics.
right.
It's economics, and he also there's saying economics and materials
Said
engineering.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So he would have had to take a little bit more physics than physics 102.
yes, which but in materials engineering, things like E equals mc squared and relativity don't really matter. They're not something that comes up in your day-to-day job, so there wouldn't be any reason to study them.
Okay, so I found a comment he made to me. So he says, this whole thing was tongue-in-cheek sarcastic. That's my point. And he talks, okay, so he mentions the flying spaghetti monster in this comment as well, which he mentioned at the beginning of the call. So this, I couldn't figure out what he was really saying. What was, when he says this whole thing, what he meant. Because this was talking about, yeah, I mean, the same thing that we talked about, but I did want to ask him about this, but I have no idea. I guess I'm kind of in between whether he is actually believing this or he doesn't.
I'm just muted for a bit because the dog's going to be barking.
Okay.
I have some questions.
Yeah.
A lot of this is over my head, but I'm interested in this pace units. Now, he says pace is the inverse of speed, or actually, I think that came up under a search, which doesn't make sense to me because I would think the inverse of speed would be slowing down. you know.
Yeah, it's just a reciprocal. So
Okay,
instead of meters per second, which is the speed, he's saying that seconds per meters. So for per meter, how much time it takes.
Okay. I thought maybe
Yeah,
pace
it doesn't really
was
help.
a
Yeah, that's
different.
the point I was making. Is it doesn't really do anything. It doesn't give you any better insight into the world, really, than just leaving it at meters per second and working from that.
And he claims that it's named after him.
Yeah, he claimed a lot of things.
Not named, but they. Oh, actually, yeah, he did say it's named, right? He used his
The
last
Fitz.
name, the Fitz. Yeah. So instead of Hertz, it's a Fitz.
I was just wondering if that's a thing, if that's an actual
Nope.
thing.
No, no, that is most definitely not. And you also don't get a unit of measure named after you because some community college professor thought it was a good idea either.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the site that you had mentioned, Jeebus. And here it talks about stance. I don't know if stance is like a new unit per distance. And there's time for distance time. So I'm not sure. I didn't really get a chance to really look through this, but I'm not sure if it's similar to what he's.
Oh, is this the whatever it is?
ISO.org. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I'm not sure what the guy is trying to achieve out of that. It's bizarre.
Yeah. Yeah, this isn't necessarily. But I mean, I guess he's going to write some stuff, but at least in what he put up in his comments, he was basically saying that well, I guess he did kind of talk about it, where he was basically saying that there's some other reality that we don't know of, and that means God.
Of
Yeah,
course.
basically, I did math wrong, which gives weird answers. That weird answers proves God.
Yeah.
And
No.
not only God is God, it's always their God. Yeah.
Yeah, that is the case too. It's always it's never oh, I found proof for the God I don't believe in.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't know if you guys had anything more you wanted to talk about, but the call was going to be mostly talking about him and what he had posted.
Yes, he does remind me a lot of the
Dave.
cosmology of David
Yeah.
guy, who is also grossly unqualified for having the opinion he's got. Like, I did one course in physics, and therefore I know more. Like one course in astronomy, which isn't cosmology. They're related, but they're not the same. Yeah.
Yep.
And where we talk about stars as opposed to talk about the stuff in between stars, which is cosmology. And therefore now I can prove God with my cosmology. And you go, and the same belligerence and absolute conviction that they know better than every professional physicist who's been studying this for their entire life and built that information up on a bedrock of an enormous body of peer-reviewed papers. No, I only need one subject, and then I know enough to topple the entirety.
Yeah, so Miranda actually makes a good comment here. Even if you were right about everything, all you would have demonstrated is that there's stuff physics hasn't explained yet, which it still doesn't mean God. It's like, when prior to relativity, we couldn't explain precisely the orbit of Mercury because it wasn't quite working with the Newtonian equations. So something wasn't quite right, but you wouldn't go say, well, Mercury's orbit doesn't exactly fit this one equation that we're aware of, that means God, right? We wouldn't do that. But in a sense, that's kind of what John is doing.
Yeah. And that was actually, Miranda, that's exactly the reason I was sort of trying to ask the question. Where does it get you? Like, honestly, and you go, oh, well, therefore God. You go, there's a major disconnect between those two pieces. It
Well, and the
doesn't get you
problem is
anywhere.
even when he was trying to explain it, he was just jumping right to
Yep.
immediately.
Yeah, there's no logical connection between the two. He's got an answer he wants, and then he was stuffing around with a thing and go, oh, that looks weird. Well, that must mean something important. Therefore, it means something important, as opposed to what the rest of us do. If you get an equation that gives you something ludicrous, your equation is almost certainly wrong. Go back and check it.
Yeah, it's like when Nepi constantly says that he disproved evolution, because the implication of that is all the thousands, if not tens of thousands or more scientists that are working on evolution are somehow wrong or hasn't, caught on to something that, he somehow knows. Nepi knows nothing about evolution, but, he using his ignorance, he claims he's debunked it, and it doesn't matter, how many times people tell him that he's wrong. uh, he's okay with believing that he might be right and all the other PhDs might be wrong.
Yeah, I'm actually loving watching him run away from milk currently. That's entertaining, because that came about because of his post where he claims, there's 9 million species of animals. And you go, well, how did Noah fit 18 million animals on the ark? He goes, they were babies. And you go, right. So that means, I don't know, I think 10,000 or species of mammal. Mammals require milk when they're babies. Where's all the milk coming from? So, and if anyone's ever tried to bottle feed a baby anything, you'll see that is a slow process. So 8 people bottle feeding 20,000 mammal babies in a day, multiple times a day. Yeah, they'd need a time machine.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit, but if you're going to get to the point where you're going to claim that all those animals are babies and they somehow got pairs of babies of each of the different quote unquote kinds, you might as well just go all the way into the magic and say that they were all
Yeah,
kind of put into stasis.
except he never even attempted to use the kind's defense. He just went with they were all babies. So he could have whittled it down a bit by appealing to kinds, but no, he didn't think of that. So
Yeah, the lack of his scientific knowledge, if you want to call it that, is just astounding. But the thing is, he doesn't even like try to address that. All he's
no,
really,
he doesn't. He's
yeah,
just
all he's
trolling.
doing is, yeah, he's just saying the same scripted responses over and over that I'm pretty sure that he doesn't understand.
Oh no, he definitely
It's-
doesn't understand.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, don't Tucker Carlson. Oh yeah, good good call, Anton.
Wait, have you guys seen that Tucker Carlson video?
No, but I saw the comment go Tucker Carlson on Joe Rogan. Therefore, you just go, oh,
Yeah, let
that
me
was
just
spectacular.
yeah, let me see if I can just find the excerpt.
Like I have a large chuckle when someone tries to use some claimed quote from Einstein to prove the God of the Christians. That's funny, but at least Einstein was a smart guy. Yeah, the same can't be said for Tucker.
Here, let me just play a little bit.
and I think some of them are bad. And if the U.S. government knows that, or elements, the people
I'm
within
not sure.
you could catch the bullet if it even makes it to you.
I'm not sure
right?
at
So
what
if you
point he
have carbon
talks
also
about.
emerging from the water.
Oh no,
Right.
sorry. This is
Yeah.
about aliens. Maybe I should say evolution. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Here it is.
Evolution. And if there is this
Is it real?
constant, I don't know, but it's visible. Like you can measure it in certain animals.
You can measure adaptation.
Yeah.
But there's no evidence that in fact, I think we've kind of given up on the idea of evolution.
Tucker Carlson, confident.
Yeah. So this is basically, what we hear from our trolls, right? That, there's adaptation, but there's no evolution, right?
Yes, but basically what that argument is saying is that it's possible to walk down to your mailbox, but you can't walk to the end of the street.
Yeah.
We know that genes change. We know that mutations occur. So yes, they're saying basically you can have small changes, but you can't have a lot of small changes to end up with a big change. Yeah, that's the argument. You can walk to your mailbox, but you can't walk to the end of the street. There's something about the distance that makes it impossible. Yeah, that is a remarkable point too. Joe Rogan is reasonable in this.
Yeah.
Look, the reality is sometimes that is the case. Actually, you're never quite sure where he's actually going to fall down on some of these things.
Well, yeah, when he gets such a wacko that, Joe Rogan has to kind of step in and say, hey, let's take it back a notch. Let's
In what
hear-
sense?
Well, in the most basic sense, the idea that, all life emerged from a single cell organism and over time, and there would be a fossil record of that, and there's not. And
There's not a fossil record of transitionary species, like species that are adapting to its environment.
there's
and they
tons
develop.
of record of
Right.
adaptation, and you see it in your own life. I mean, I have a lot of dogs. I see adaptation in dogs, through the
Sure.
litter to litter. But no, there's no evidence at all that zero, that, people, evolve seamlessly from a single cell amoeba. No, there's not.
Now the word seamlessly is
Well, so eventually he gets to the point where Tucker says, if we came from some single cell, organism, that why don't we have fossils of it? Because he can't grasp the idea that, trying to make get a fossil out of a single cell organism from, potentially 1 billion years ago is practically impossible. But because we don't have fossils, then, it must not be true. At
We
least
do have something akin to that, though. So fossilized
not from
stromatolites.
that far, though. Not from that
Yeah,
far back.
no. Fossilized stromatolites are over 1 billion years old. But they are large structures. They still exist today, but they're large structures, and we're not really looking at the single cells themselves, but rather the effect of like billions of those single cells building up layers.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So you don't have direct fossil of the organism. You have a fossil of what the organism did.
Yeah, I think there are some fossils, sort of fossils is just kind of remnants of like specific single cell organism.
Yeah, there
We
are.
can't get a lot of information, but yeah, but when you get back that far, I don't think it's possible, or, even if it's something out there, we wouldn't have found it yet.
Well, diatomaceous earth is a fossil of a single-celled organism.
Yeah. Wait, is that a single cell?
Yeah, well, I've got a bag of diatomaceous earth in the pantry there, and it's a white powder that comes from a crumbly rock that is the silica shells of diatoms. Yeah, so yes, if you look under a microscope there, you'll see the shells of those single-celled organisms.
Right, which is different, right? It's not, like just a protein, like a protein, a cell composed of protein. It's actually, you're saying this, it actually has a skeleton, right? In a sense,
Yeah, it's
and
made
you're
of
saying a
silica.
skeleton. Yeah.
Yes, well, no, well, a little exoskeleton. Really, they're gorgeous. They're well worth having a look at the forms and shapes of diatoms. They're amazing. And and they're still around today. Anyone who's got a fish tank and where they've got brown algae in it, that's the same stuff. So those are diatoms.
Yeah. Hmm.
But yes, you're
Okay.
right. It is ridiculous to think that a tiny, squishy little soap bubble, basically, because that's what a
Right.
single-celled organism is, a little double-walled micelle of what is effectively a soap membrane, would survive approximately 4 billion years being squidged into a rock. Yeah, that's a little bit like Nepi demanding that we show new anatomy over the past
Right.
10,000 years. You
Yeah.
go, it's not really how new anatomy works. And of course,
Right.
he'd move the dial anytime we attempted to do that anyway. If you say, oh, well, here's something that is, well, actually, I gave an example, a person who has 6 fingers. That's a piece of new anatomy. But he won't accept that.
Yeah. Because there's already a quote unquote gene for fingers, right?
Yeah. So where did the gene for fingers come from? Well,
Yeah.
from the gene for fins.
So Hampton asks, how do mud puddles fit into all this? So the reason why Nepi keeps on bringing mud puddles is that, uh, I think there are some abiogenesis hypothesis where they talk about how wet-dry cycles could potentially, be involved in creating the biomolecules or maybe even, polymerization. So because the hot dry cycles, would happen in mud puddles that get wet and gets dried. That's where he keeps on saying, "Oh, mud puddles cause a human being."
Yeah, it's also part of the very, very bog standard creationist. There was a mud puddle and then a creature crawled out of it. And you
Yeah.
go, yeah, that
Well,
doesn't
actually,
even resemble a strawman. That's just a pile of grass you've raked into a heap and set on fire.
That's a good point. I wonder if Nepi even understands that, right? Whether it's coming from, that, there are reports of wet dry cycles, or he's thinking that is some type of, like primordial, soup, which is the mud puddle, and you do get some creature, or he thinks that the science says that you do get some creature that somehow crawls out of it. And maybe that's what he
Yeah,
is thinking.
that is definitely the straw man that gets used very, very often in the world of the Yek.
So it's not even
There's
sophisticated of, kind
no,
of, oh, that wet dry cycle, hypothesis, but
God
something
no.
really, really ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah. It just so happens that a mud puddle has turned out to be actually surprisingly good candidate.
Yeah. Well, and science isn't saying that it's mud puddles, but just saying that the wet dry cycles in the chemical reactions, would,
Yeah,
kind of
essentially.
enhance some of these.
Yeah, essentially, as the thing dries in the presence of certain clay minerals, you
Yeah.
end up causing all of the amino acids that are and chiral molecules to go from having a racemic mix of left and right-handedness to homochirality.
Well, I think
and
that's the other thing that when he says moist rocks, I know there's a study about how like a rock substrate could catalyze some of these reactions. So I presume that's where he had gotten
no,
that from, but no.
no, you're giving him too much credit there. Honestly, it's basically all there were rocks. Therefore, when it got rained on, it made a person.
Huh.
That's what they're saying. Yeah, it's that. It's honestly that bad. Don't give Neppy the credit of thinking that he's actually being close to the actual science, because he never is.
Well, I don't think that he is coming up with it, but he's read it somewhere, right, on ICR or DI, where
Oh,
they're kind of taking these.
These are Dr. Dino level stupidity.
Yeah, I mean, I know that if he was actually on, he wouldn't have been able to actually explain where he got those or why is that. But I
No, he
figured
just
he was at
declared that he's
least.
the expert, and he's been doing it for 50 years, so therefore he knows
Yeah.
more, and basically rely upon the argument from authority.
Well, and he recently said he's an expert theologian, so that was another funny comment that he made.
Well, he's an expert at everything, but of course we know he's been telling people lies for his whole life, to the point where those lies were become criminal.
I was actually surprised that he kind of went back to him being, this retired millionaire doctor thing. I thought he would stop doing it, but he seems to every once in a while bring that up.
Yep. Well, he needs to hype his qualifications to make it sound more impressive than it actually is. He was, I don't doubt he was called doctor by his gullible patients, but it doesn't make him an actual doctor, and he's certainly no millionaire living in his $38,000 trailer.
Well, I
that he
think
shares with his dad.
at least in the US, chiropractors do call themselves doctor.
Yeah, they do here too.
Yeah. So
Yeah, so but he refers to himself as a medical doctor, not a chiropractor. Repeatedly, he referred to himself as a medical surgeon, so we didn't confuse him with tree surgeon. I assume that was the reason, because that's how medical surgeons refer to themselves. Yeah, no. So anyway,
all right. Well, I have to take off, so I'm going to stop it here. But this was very interesting, and as I let you guys know, for next week, we have that Gilbert guy, and he's very eager to proselytize to us. So, so we have a guest assigned for next week. So I hope you guys can join us.
In some ways, I'm looking forward to that more than I was to John, because I was pretty sure John was going to go the way it went, and it did. But at least if we have there's no doubt the guy genuinely believes what he believes. So maybe we'll get someone whose honesty might be a little bit more easy to follow.
Yeah. By the way, I don't know if you noticed, but he said he changed his YouTube handle, which was probably a good thing. He shouldn't be using his full real name.
Yeah, it's not ideal.
Yep.
All
right.
Well,
thank you guys for joining, and and thanks everyone in the live chats for listening in on this. This was very interesting, and it actually got a lot of participation. So thank you everyone, and we will see you next week in the comments.
Sweet.